Okay, today we're taking a look at a system that possibly has a broken HDMI port. It's an older model PS4, or one of the first models I should say. Just by looking at the port itself, it doesn't look obvious that it's broken, other than there is a little bit of bending up here on the top of the HDMI port. But you can't tell if the actual pins have been pushed in, and I didn't see much movement when I was playing around in there. But we're going to take a look at the actual motherboard and see if we can see any damage. It does have the white light of death, not the blue or anything. I also checked, as you see, I pulled the hard drive to see if there's a hard drive failure. Some HDMI port problems can actually come from a hard drive failure. The short or something in the hard drive causes the board to stop recognizing HDMI and acts just like a broken HDMI port. And people will actually end up breaking their HDMI ports because they think it's the HDMI port and they'll wiggle it and everything else and then cause more damage. So before you go wiggling HDMI ports and stuff, pull the hard drive. Okay, and as usual for this, we need a T9. I believe the T8 will also work, but T9 is a little firmer. And it has to be the security bit, because it is a PS4. I don't know if you can see on the camera the little hole in the center of my security bit. And in this video, we're mostly just going to do the diagnosis of the HDMI port, and then I'll probably do another video actually fixing it, if it ends up being an HDMI port. There's a few other things it could be, but more than likely it's an HDMI port. I mean, I've seen HDMI encoders. As I was saying, I've seen HDMI encoder issues. I just had to grab something and put my screws in. And, I mean, that could be the issue because they did say that they had the HDMI port replaced already once. But it was a place that normally just fixes cell phones, and I guess they were trying to get into more detailed solder work, and then when they went back to get it fixed the second time, they were told that the place doesn't do that kind of work anymore, which means they may have not done that good of a job, and they were finding that they're getting more failures than anything after they did them, so if you can't keep your work from coming back over and over again, you don't do it anymore. So we may have some solder cleanup to do inside also. And it looks like they actually put the original warranty seals right back on. I can barely tell they were taken off, which in my practice is a horrible thing to do because then you can't tell if you're the one that worked on it or somebody else worked on it. I usually like to know if I'm the only person that's been inside the system, so I use my own custom warranty seals. I'm not saying that other shops do a horrible job, it's just you want to know if you've been the only one working in there. And we have the one on top, and then we have 3 warranty seals on the bottom we're going to take off. These ones don't actually say warranty on them, but they're still there. You still need to take them off, and they're barely on there, so yeah, these have been off before. Usually take them off, you just can use your nail. If you don't have a bunch of nails, just a sharp razor blade or something will usually get them. Actually, this one in the corner here is on a little better than the last one. I'm having some trouble there. Like I said, you take something sharp, use a little bit of tweezers here, and there we go. Peel right off. Okay. And as I was saying, the reason why you got to take both sets of screws out is you do have to take the power supply out to get the motherboard to pop loose. Now for this top plate, you just put your fingers under here and start popping all that loose, and then this will pop right off. You will need a 2.0 or so Phillips head. A 1.0 will probably work too. Almost any Phillips head, just to get loose some of the few Phillips head screws that are in here. like the two here that hold the processor down. It doesn't really matter a whole lot what order you take the screws off in. The only two you got to remember before you start getting too far at getting the motherboard off, because you want to pry up on the motherboard while it's still attached to something, is the two underneath that go to the power supply. And this is the same as the front. You just take and pry up. See if I can get a better angle. Pry up like this. Should flex away. And you can tell this one's been apart before because it actually is coming pretty easily. If it doesn't come apart easily, you can actually take a pry tool. Right under here is where the clips pretty much are. And just pry up with a spludger or something. And as you see, they did get some playtime into it before the HDMI port broke again, so most shops hopefully would clean out the dust before they returned it to the customer. And these are the two screws that definitely have to come out. So you can think about pulling up the motherboard as I bump the camera mount. These ones technically don't have to come out to get the motherboard loose, but if you don't take them out, you can't get to the wires underneath, which means you're going to be pulling ribbon cables and everything else from the other side, which isn't the healthiest way to pull the ribbon cables. So basically just remove the power supply for, well, easy reassembly too. And just same as anything else in there, you just push something underneath to pry up on the edges of the power supply. It'll start to come loose a little bit, and then do the same on the other side. Just kind of wiggle a little bit here and there, and it will pop right up out of there for you. Oh, as I missed the third screw. Thinking, why isn't this coming out of there? Which actually, I don't know why Sony put a screw there. It's not really needed. I'm pretty sure 4 screws and a power supply is more than enough to hold it down, but they figured they needed one more security bit in there. Which actually they did remove in the newer models, a lot of those. There's actually literally only like 3 screws, I think, holding down the newer model power supplies. They realized they had way too many, and then they put a million more screws in the motherboard. And the few things you got to disconnect when you're under here is you got to disconnect the Wi-Fi antenna. Obviously, as I was pulling it up, I did disconnect the power cord to the power supply. And then you have to disconnect the power for your disk drive, and then the disk drive ribbon cable. So if you try to pull this from the other side, you can get your finger in there and pull it loose, but you'll never get it back in. So that's why you want to pull the power supplies, for reassembly, definitely, and for ease on disassembly. This one, you can usually just kind of pull up on the wire a little bit and then get a hold of the connector. This one is a push-down metal release, and then you slide using the plastic to slide away. And then just stick something, either your nail or a spludger, underneath the edge of this, near the metal. Don't pry up on the wire. And all that's loose now. Now we can flip back over to the other side and take out all of the security bits along the actual edges of the motherboard. Because now nothing other than those are holding down the motherboard. And if you ever forget where the screws go back in, Sony is actually nice and does put little arrows where all these screws go. Because there is one, I think it's over here somewhere, that actually doesn't go back in until the plastic's back on. And I have to say, I have put it in early and then had to pull the plastic back off because I realized it wasn't supposed to go in yet. And this particular model does have the extra black screw, which you can see poking above here. And what that is that's another screw to secure from this side that you do have to take out. It's a Phillips head before you can pull the motherboard. Not all models have that screw. So something you should look for, but you may not have. So if it's not there, don't think that you're missing something. It's just Sony didn't do it in every model. Most things that Sony work on, they have at least 5 or 6 versions of each motherboard or sets of screws or whatever else before they even come out with the next model. It's kind of horrific how many different models of things that Sony has. The PS3, if you look through all the generations, is ridiculous. Okay. Looks like all our heat pads made it off in the metal. Also over here, I didn't even mention as I was pulling it, I'm so used to pulling it, is the fan connector. You want to get that out of the way. If you don't, you'll end up ripping it while you're trying to pull the motherboard up. And then all you gotta do is start from up here where the USB ports are. Stick your fingers just underneath the 2 edges, and the board should come up pretty easily and slide right out of there. Actually, that was almost too easy. I didn't even feel any grip from their thermal paste. Probably a very cheap thermal paste from what I'm seeing. Doesn't have any glue factor to it. Well, let's take a look at that HDMI port if we can. Looks like it may have slid back. Hard to say, it might just be a bad solder job. We'll use the magnifying glasses and take a look at it real quick and see what I can see. Yeah, some of their solder points don't look that good, I don't think. Get a little bit more light here on the subject. And see if their solder looks like it's maybe brittle, where they didn't actually get a good solder point. Yeah, it looks like their solder wasn't that good. A few of them were pretty good, but some of the ones in the middle here look like they're brittle. Okay. What we'll do to test some of those is we'll actually take and go through. Let's see if we can magnify it into where I'm going here. Move the board over so you can actually see what I'm doing. Okay, it's as magnifying as I can get. See if I can move closer to the board. See if they pulled anything else off the back. Doesn't look like they worked on anything else other than the HDMI port. Definitely looks like the HDMI port was changed at some point though. Or at least resoldered. You kind of see how dull they kind of look in some of there. Okay, now we're going to take a multimeter and we're going to take and put it in diode test mode. Which reason why diodes need the test mode is, if you don't know, but diodes only go in one direction, so you need to be able to test which is the anode and cathode on a diode. Which basically lets us be able to tell if we get a beep, means electricity is able to go from point A to point B. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and stick one end in the HDMI port contacts, and we're going to test the other side on the alternate points in the back. Which actually, give me 1 second, I actually need to grab my alternate list of points. And all that is basically just a piece of paper where I've written down, actually a picture, where I haven't marked what point on the HDMI port goes to what point alternate on the board. Because the thing is, when you're testing, if you got a poke up in here, it's sometimes hard to hit exactly where you want. But what you can do is you can touch the top of here on one of these, and then if you know the alternate point, you can make sure it's going all the way through the board to where it goes. There's an alternate point for pin 1 over there. Is all the way over here. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 caps down. Actually, I'm not 100% sure if these are all caps, but most of them look like caps. That's short for capacitor. 5. So the back side of this one here should go to our point over there, which it does. So we got 1 good. And go to alternate point 2. Which if we look, our grounds are at 3, 9, 12, 15, and 18. So we're not to a ground yet. So that's the other thing you want to do is check to make sure you don't have a short to ground on those same pins. So if we check pin 1 again, and test up to ground, nothing. And I bumped pin 3 there, which is a ground. And then if we take and test pin 2, the alternate point is right over here on this cap. If I can point at it. This is actually a capacitor. I know that for sure. This might be a diode or something. That's what I think the other ones over there were either diodes or resistors. They're basically just black dots on the board practically. The caps always have 2 shiny ends with a brown in the middle. Weirdest looking capacitors when you're used to seeing how capacitors normally look when they're bigger. But yep, pin 2 seems to be connected. Test the alternate point to ground, nothing. Looks good there. Let's go for pin 3. Pin 3 is a ground, which I bumped earlier, so I'm pretty sure that one's good. We'll go for pin 3. Yep, pin 3 is good. Pin 4 is back over to that row of objects over there. This one's only a third one down, should be our alternate point for pin 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. That one right there. That one looks fine. And then we got pin 5. And we're in that same row over there. It's the first object in that row. So right here. And we go to pin 5. Yep. And we'll check the ground again. I don't think I did that with pin 4. Let's go back and do that real quick. Third one, and then to ground. Nope, nothing on ground. You basically are checking for shorts and opens. Either one is a bad thing. Pin 6 shouldn't be connected to anything, so we'll check for a short to ground on it. And then pin 7. That goes back over here. We got this little L-shaped connector and then what looks like a diode of some kind. Right in here. You can connect to either spot on it, because that's just a trace on the board that goes between the two. And then we gotta find pin 7. Looks like that's good. Check ground, nothing on ground. Okay, we got pin 8. This is where they get fun. Which I don't know if they didn't check their work or what, but there's nothing scraped off on the alternate point for this. Which the alternate point on this one is literally the traces on the board here. which means they never scraped them off to test them. So we're probably going to skip over those ones, but it's literally all little dots that you see right through here. These are each of the alternate points for them. And you basically got to scrape a little bit of the surface off, but usually it's better to do that without trying to do it with the actual probes here. So we're going to skip pin 8. You can do pin 9, that's just a ground. So I'm hoping it's not one of the ones with the traces, because making an alternate point to the traces can be a pain. Okay, and here's pin 9. And between each of these two traces is a ground every time. They decided to shove their grounds in between where they had two other wires, since you can't really run a ground wire that easily. Well, I think we got a bad ground. So what happens is I touch, let's see here, so I'm getting the right one. Let me double count by counting again here. 6, 7, 8, 9. That's pin 9. I lightly touch pin 9 and touch ground, nothing. Push down on pin 9 though, I get a beep, which means pin 9 is not connected any longer. Looks like those middle ones they may have missed out on because they couldn't test them, or didn't get a very good connection on them. We'll do pin 12, that's another ground. I get the same thing. Looks like they didn't solder the grounds down very well. Probably thought they weren't that important because there's multiple grounds. But different grounds are used for different things depending what you're hooking up to. They don't use just one common ground like they do in a car. Okay, so pin 13. Of course, it could be everything through there is not connected very well, and I won't know until I trace back the pins that are need to be uncovered under here, the ones that need to be scraped. Got enough time in the video, we might do that, but we're kind of running low on time. And it's just the same test, just these are your alternate points, each one of these little things. Pin 8, pin 9, pin 10, right, pin 8, 9 is in the middle, 10, 11, 13, 14, 16, 17, and pin 19. So let's skip all the way down. Yep, 19 will be the last one on there. Yeah, it looks like most of the rest of the pins are all underneath there. But just even the two grounds that you've seen that we didn't have, that's probably causing the problem. I'll check the ground in between the other ones real quick. Got a couple minutes left of the video here. I don't block out too much of the light with my hands so you can't see. Okay, so right between these two, ground here, I think that was the one I just tested. If I lightly touch it, you get nothing. If I push down on it, I get a beep. So yeah, definitely got bad grounds, which means the rest of the wires are probably the same way. There should be a ground. That one's lightly touched, that one's good. Basically, all I gotta do is go through and probably touch up their solder work. They probably didn't have a soldering iron that was getting hot enough. Lead-free solder tends to be that way. Actually, it looks like they might have scraped some of the wires through here. Okay, let's see. Between these two, we should have another ground at number 18 there. 18 looks solid. Looks like just a few of the middle ones here, they didn't do a very good job on soldering. So I might just have to touch up some solder work. But yeah, definitely something wrong with the HDMI port there. At least it's not slid back into the system, so there's no physical damage to it. But yep, that's basically how you go through and test an HDMI port. If all those turn out good, you got good solder in all of them, everything's good, then you get to go under the board and check under this plate here. Actually, let me magnify the camera back out some so you can see where they're kind of at. Under this plate here, you actually have 4 HDMI filters and then the HDMI encoder. If you can't find a problem with the HDMI port, you do have to go back to those. This time we didn't have to. I do think I have another video up, pretty sure at least on YouTube, I'm not sure if I have it on my Facebook, of at least the encoders being a problem, or the filters, I mean, being a problem. And I do have a soldering video, I'm pretty sure, also of my replacing the actual HDMI encoder, which is really big pain. I think it's like 110 point solder. You definitely need some blown air or a rework station to do that one. But yeah, if you have any questions, just post a comment, and thank you guys. Bye.